And a Hail Mary for Tannehill.
And look who your Hail Mary preventer is back at the 15-yard line. None other than Gronkowski.
7 seconds left. Tannehill will throw it. And this will end it after the shovel, or will it? Miami running around, circling. Oh, look out! Gronkowski didn't have the angle. Touchdown! Oh, can you drink? A miracle!
Welcome, Fins Clan, to the Bad, the Bold, and the Beautiful Dolphins Sports Talk podcast with your host, Jared Smalley, co-host, Justin Harris, coming at you from Anchor FM Studios. Hello, Fin Clan. Welcome to another episode of the Bad, the Bold, and the Beautiful Dolphins Sports Talk. And Justin, how is your day going today so far, sir?
It's going pretty good.
Even after how the game ended today?
Yeah. I mean, even though we ended in a loss, both teams actually played pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little surprised. I was, skeptical at first. I thought the Jets were going to start off fast and Miami was going to play catch-up all day. And, I mean, that did, in a way, happen. But Miami actually came out first and scored, and they were up 3-0. And I thought maybe they were going to, take more chances inside the red zone than they did. And, obviously, after the first drive of the game, there was no way of knowing how the game would have unfolded. But what is your take as far as how the Dolphins performed today offensively?
Offensively, I think they definitely performed a lot better than usual games, especially coming out of the start. They couldn't capitalize in the red zone, but the kicker definitely stepped up the game and kept them in the game to try and win it. And fortunately, they just lost it at the very end.
Yeah, I mean, it was a controversial call like it was at the end of the first half. 2 different reversal plays that the Jets, threw the red flag, and the play was reversed. So obviously there was enough there at both times for the officials to say, you know what, we made a mistake. That directly cost the Dolphins 10 points, 7 points at the end of the first half, which, you know what, I mean, if you wanted to be positive, you were like, well, the Dolphins are down by 7 points at halftime. But we were down by 7 points at halftime last week, too. And look what happened. Eventually they ran off, or I should say we ran off 23 in a row and won the game 37-31. That happened last week. This week is a little bit more positive. Both teams in the first half had the ball 4 times. Each one scored 3 times. The difference is the Jets had 2 touchdowns and 1 field goal, and Miami had 3 field goals. Did you think at any point in the second half, maybe the Dolphins would have had better success in the red zone?
Yeah, I mean, a couple times, but fortunately it didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, according to my notes, the Dolphins today were 0-6, 0 for 6 inside the red zone today, 0 for 3 in each half. In addition to that, I know Jason Sanders was 7 for 8 field goals, but he did miss a 34-yard field goal that would have put us only down 16-15 at that point. But we missed it, and the score remained 16-12 in favor of the Jets. But I will say this. The Jets took that next possession. They went all the way down the field, all the way down to the Dolphins' 14-yard line. And at one point, they were sitting on it at our 14-yard line, 2nd and 1, and then they couldn't move the ball. It was 3 plays in a row. They couldn't get a yard. So 4th and 1, they got stuffed at the line. They could have, kicked a field goal there and maybe went up 19-12, but they took a chance. They didn't get it. And, the score remained 16-12. So it kind of negated I feel like at that point, the missed field goal and that scoring opportunity the Jets had. But that being said, still 6 times inside the red zone, you have to score a touchdown at least once, right? Like, if Miami does that, they win this game.
You would think so.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, I have a plethora of game notes. I think like 5 pages front and back as I'm writing down key plays to every drive. But the thing that sticks out the most to me was the 2 plays that were reversed in favor for the Jets that led directly to 10 points. Miami's 7 field goals, 7 for 8, missed a 34-yarder, 0 for 6 inside the red zone. I mean, for the game, you look at the statistics, they're pretty close all around. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 21 for 37, 245 yards, 1 interception. He was also the leading rusher for the Dolphins, 8 carries, 65 yards. Isaiah Ford, up until the day, he had 2 catches for 9 yards for the season. And Miami's kind of like, we want you on the team. We're going to get rid of you. We want to negotiate your contract. So they bring him back after they cut him a few weeks ago. And again, for this season, 2 catches, 9 yards. Today, he had 6 catches for 92 yards, and he was just making play after play after play, keeping drives alive the whole game. Sam Donald, 20 for 36, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, and interception. Their running back, 19 carries, 74 yards. They kept Powell under control, especially in the second half. He didn't have anything going in the second half. I think they held him to 25 yards rush in the second half. Anderson, though, 7 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, he did most of his damage in the first half. I want to say he only had 40 yards receiving in the second half. Obviously, he got the touchdown in the first half because nobody got any touchdowns in the second half. For the game, the final score, obviously, the Jets 22-21. Total yards, 374 to 362 in favor of the Jets. Passing the ball, the Jets had 262 yards in the air. Miami had 240. Only difference of 22 yards. Rushing, Miami actually had more yards on the ground, which I didn't expect to happen. They had 122 yards on the ground. The Jets had 112, which 122 yards on the ground is 60 more yards than their average for the season, which is 62.5 yards, I believe. Total plays, 69 for the Jets, 66 for Miami, so pretty close. Both teams had 22 first downs. Both teams had 5 penalties against them, but the difference is the Jets had 88 penalty yards against them. Miami had 48. So Miami had 40 fewer penalty yards. Each team had a turnover. Jets got 2 sacks. We got 1 sack. Time of possession was almost even. Miami had 30 minutes and 6 seconds. Jets had 29 minutes and 54 seconds. So a difference of 12 seconds. So when you look at all of that, statistically, total of the game, it's almost even. And obviously the score represents that 22-21. On the ground.
On like a high horse, they're going to be more confident going into the game.
Okay.
And hopefully they're going to be able to take that and start the game off strong like they did today and be able to pull out the win.
Well, I hope so. Because, like I said, in my heart, I want the Dolphins to win. In my head, I know that they would get a better draft pick if they lose out and go 3-13. Probably have the second overall pick at that point because Washington, I believe, has 3 wins. So I'm assuming because they have the head-to-head, Miami would get that pick over them. Miami's got 2 losses by 1 point, obviously today and against Washington. Both times Miami had an opportunity to win at the very end of the game. Had they done that, instead of being 3-10, they would be 5-8. It's still, at that point, if that happened, they wouldn't even have a losing season, which would be pretty respectable considering how.
Yeah, most definitely. they're even though they're coming off of a loss, I think the way that they performed today, it's gonna keep them up there as far as.
Excuse me. Do you think the Dolphins can take any of this momentum into next week against the Giants, who at one point of the season was 2-2. Now they're 2-10. They're on the road tomorrow night against the Eagles, who are hungry for a win. most likely the Giants will have 9 straight losses. Do you see Miami taking advantage of that situation? And against the Bengals the week after that, against teams that actually have worse records than the Dolphins. And it wouldn't be inconceivable to think that if Miami won those games with 1 game left of the season, they would be 7-8, playing a Patriots team that may not have to start all their starters, depending on how the next few weeks go out between the Ravens and the Patriots. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do.
So, I mean, to me, that's a little crazy because had that happened, they were tanking this year. So had they won both of those games, they could be fighting for a 500 record, with the next 2 games being against teams that have worse records than they do. The Giants next week, obviously, to be 7-8, if that would have hypothetically been a scenario that happened, that wouldn't have been bad at all for a team that was supposed to tank to get Tua. You know, a lot of people thought that the Dolphins were going to go 0-16 this year. I mean, I know they're 3-10 and it's a terrible record and all that, but I made a podcast earlier this morning actually, during which I took all the statistics after week 1, then after week 4, then after week 13, and compared each category of how total yards, total points, all that, how it was once being completely dominated by their opponents. Now it's still their opponents are winning every category, but the difference between each number is a lot closer than it was after week 4. So Miami's played a lot better. One of those categories is what I talked about was their red zone possession and turning those red zone possessions into touchdowns. Beginning of the season, week 4, they were only 17% successful of turning their red zone possessions into touchdowns, which is dead last in the league after week 4. However, coming off their bye, week 7 starting against Buffalo, they were 80% successful in red zone possessions, turning those into touchdowns up until the day, which obviously they were 0 for 6. But 80% from week 7 to week 13 made them number 1 in the league. And when you average what they did through week 1 through 4, and then weeks 7 through 13 for the season, they were 67% successful in red zone possessions up until today, obviously. But even at 67%, puts them at 3rd. And I believe I mentioned that earlier. But just behind the Packers and the Titans, only 2 teams that were more successful than a 3-10 Dolphins team scoring touchdowns inside the red zone. That's pretty impressive. Hi, guys. I just want to take a moment out of your day to talk to you about Anchor. It is a podcast platform that you can use to create your very own podcast for free. They have everything you need in one place. Anchor has creation tools that you can use to record and edit your own podcasts right from your smartphone or computer. It doesn't get a whole lot easier than that. In addition to that great service, once you have completed your podcast, Anchor will do all the work for you to ensure that the podcast gets as many listeners as possible by distributing your masterpiece to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. And that's the best part of Anchor. It literally has everything you need in one place to create your very own podcast. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So, what do you think the Dolphins could have done differently? I know they had the ball like inside the Jets' 10-yard line 3 times in the first half. Every time they had it, I feel like they passed it. And I know the Jets are really good against the rush, but do you think they could have switched it up a little bit? Because there was incomplete every time they got the ball down there. Maybe they could have got some kind of penalty in favor of themselves instead of against, in favor of the Jets. But what is your take? I want to hear from you, your own words, how the Dolphins did today and what you expect to see them to do next week on the road against the Giants.
Well, as far as how they played today, like I said before, I think they came out strong and stayed pretty strong through the entire game. As far as missing 6 opportunities in the red zone. I was really hoping they would try another trick play like they did last game. Maybe not exactly the trick play that they did last game, but something like it, something that someone's never seen before. Because, I mean, at that point, they got nothing to lose for this. Try and get that pretty nice to see.
I agree.
Now, going into the next game, I think they just definitely need to take what they played today and bring it into the next game and stay strong. Just try and finish out the season with year. So trying another trick play just to try and pull something, out of the blue to try and win the game would have been.
I'm thinking it's going to be a monumental overhaul between the talent they have right now to the talent they're going to have next year.
3 wins, and come off some wins, even though you're going to have a bad record, you're out of the playoffs, you might lose some spots in the draft or whatever, but at that point you're looking more like a team that's rebuilding, getting stronger rather than.
So you think it's better for them to try to go out in the season on a winning note?
Yeah.
Than trying to just okay, let's settle for 3 wins and see if we can get the second overall pick. Being that the Bengals will probably get the number 1 overall pick, most likely being they have 1 win and Dolphins have 3. They play each other a couple weeks in Miami. Miami, I feel like, is playing harder than most teams that have 3, 4, 5 wins. A lot of these teams,
first round pick,
that have 3, 4, 5 wins have had these number of wins for most of the season. Like the Lions, they haven't had a win at 6 or 7 weeks. The Giants haven't had a win, and they've lost 8 games in a row. The Cardinals, the same thing. They've not had a win in forever, in the first, probably since the second month of the season beginning. So early October, and here we are, December now. So what I'm saying is that the Dolphins, despite only having 3 wins and despite losing today, they've still won 3 of the last 6 games. Today they was the wrong end of a 22-21 score. I feel like I feel like they should win. They should try to win. The Dolphins probably won't get Joe Burrow. I was predicting that the Bengals would not go for a quarterback because they have 2 rookie quarterbacks on the roster right now. But them bringing Andy Dalton back in as their starting quarterback lets me know that they're not happy with them and that they're going to get a quarterback this offseason. So most likely that's going to be Joe Burrow. The only reason why it wouldn't be is if they went for a player like Chase Young, which I think Miami should go for as well. They can trade. They have so many picks. They could utilize their picks and get a quarterback, maybe not Joe Burrow, but maybe Tua, as well as they could maybe manipulate some of their picks, use it as trade up to sacrifice some picks later on to get Chase Young. So they have a really good stout defensive end to bring pressure on the opposing quarterbacks. I just think that if they can get Tua and Chase Young, no matter who they get the rest of the draft, is going to be amazing draft overall. Plus, they still have $128 million under the cap to bring in other talent. So I don't know. It's going to be crazy. I still have my original prediction by 2021, the Dolphins are going to make the playoffs year in and year out. So just have 1 more year to get their team together, get healthy, start winning, playing in a key, cohesive unit, gelling together and building. So enough about that. I wasn't able to keep up with scores from the games. So do you want to go over the of what they do this year to next year, to carrying that to 2021?
Well, before we get into that, I wanted to ask you, what do you think, as far as what you said for key to victory, that the Dolphins were able to stay close to your predictions for?
Well, I'm glad you asked that very good question. I was actually thinking about that. I was writing down the final stats of the game. One of my keys was that Ryan Fitzpatrick to throw for at least 250 yards. He threw for 245. I wanted him to throw for 2 touchdowns. He had multiple chances to get that easily, but unfortunately he got no touchdowns. But also to keep a clean game, like last week, kind of early in the game, he threw an interception, but that was the only turnover the Dolphins had. So they cleaned it up after that. So it's pretty happy. And also, like last week, they were able to equal or the number of turnovers they allowed to the turnovers they forced. So both teams ended with 1 turnover. Dolphins have been playing cleaner the last couple of weeks. Taking care of the ball. Not really getting a whole lot of forced turnovers, but equalizing what they turn over to what they force turnover. So that at least they're not losing a turnover battle the last couple of weeks. The other thing was for Devontae Parker to have a repeat day. That didn't happen, unfortunately. But the one thing that did happen was that I wanted the team overall to have 100 yards on the ground, and they had 122. So they were able to do that. And despite everything else, they lost by a point. Had a bunch of things gone differently, as is the case for most games that are decided by 1 point, obviously the team that lost could have won. So that being said, we can get into next week, and I want you to do your predictions, and I'll follow you up and do my prediction.
All right. Well, next week, like I mentioned a little bit before, as long as the Dolphins come into the game strong like they did today, I definitely think they'll be able to pull out the win. Hopefully they can capitalize on some of their red zone opportunities and get a touchdown or 2, which will end up.
The scores from this week, I wasn't able to keep up with all the scores, but I heard that you were able to keep track. Do you want to go through the scores and let everyone know what they are?
Yeah. Starting off with the Dallas and Chicago game, that was Chicago won that one 31-24. In case anybody didn't see that earlier in the week. We also got the Cincinnati Bengals and Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Browns pulled ahead 27-19. That was actually a pretty close game until the very end. Baltimore and Buffalo. Baltimore took it with 24-17. That was also a close game till the end. Carolina, Atlanta. Atlanta took that one 40-20. Green Bay over Washington 20-15. Denver pulled in, I believe, the only upset this week so far at 38-24 over Houston. Detroit was able to get a touchdown and not be a victim of the shutout against the Vikings 20-7. San Francisco and New Orleans had the highest scoring game of the week to 48-46. That was down to the wire to win it with a field goal.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. Of course, New York and Miami, that was also kind of down the wire, not as high scoring, but New York took that one 22-21. And the Bucks pulled out a win today, 38-35 over Indianapolis Colts.
Well, that makes it 3 in a row for them. So I'm sure
Yep.
Tampa Bay fans are happy. The team's 6-7. So I think mathematically they're still in the playoff hunt at this point. So usually 6-7, 7-6, if you're around there, it's good enough to try to attempt to get a wild card spot. So best of luck to them. What are your, to conclude today's podcast, let's run through what you think is going to happen next week and predict the score, please.
Making the score 31-21.
In favor of Miami?
Yes.
Okay. I can respect that. I have 2 different predictions, as is most of the cases now the rest of the season. I have some notes written down, and this is not statistically calculated to the game that just happened. So these numbers are going to be slightly better for the Dolphins in every category because they did better against the Jets than what their season totals showed at this point for averages. But before we get into each category, ESPN gives Miami Dolphins only a 35.7% chance of winning. The Giants is 64%. So nearly double chance of winning for the Giants over the Dolphins. The Dolphins, before today's game, was averaging 16.7 points per game and allowing 31.4, which was a difference of 14.7 more points their opponents are scoring per game than they are, which is a big deal, but not nearly as big as it was earlier in the season. It was way different. A lot more points they were allowing than their opponents. But the Giants, they're not doing very much better. They're only scoring 2.5 points more per game and allowing 3.1 points less per game. So to me, that's pretty damn close. Not that much of a difference. Total yards, the Dolphins they're almost averaging 300 yards a game. Today they got 363, so obviously it's a little bit better. The Giants are getting 340 yards a game. So, again, that's pretty close to each other. Miami's allowing 409 yards a game. Giants 387. So all these categories are pretty close. It's actually the closest it's been all season. So despite that, ESPN is still giving the Giants nearly 2/3 of a chance to win this game. I feel like, because I was looking at the head-to-head comparisons between the quarterbacks and receivers and running backs and whatnot, the Giants, they go out and they play their game and they keep a clean game and they win the time of possession, and the Dolphins defense just has a lot of mistakes, penalties against them, which hasn't been the case, but important penalties have been, like plays that have been reviewed all year. I can't think of any plays that have been reviewed that's gone in Miami's favor. And I mean, this is game in and game out. Every time it gets reviewed, it goes in favor to the Dolphins' opponents. I feel if that happens again, Miami loses, 27-20 on the road. However, if Miami can take care of the ball, have a good game like they did today on the road, on the ground, and it was like 34 degrees, I think the temperature was at game time, so I don't really see it happening to be, too much cooler. It's the same stadium, just, a few days later, so it's probably going to be about the same weather. I feel like the Dolphins can win 27-23. I think this time they get the possession at the end of the game and they get a touchdown. And instead of having a chance to tie it, they go ahead and they get that go-ahead score. The very end of the fourth quarter, the Giants go down the field, but because they need a touchdown, they can't get it. They're down 27-23, aren't able to get a touchdown, and that's how the Dolphins win. Do you have anything to add?
Well, I'm looking at some of my notes here, and the Dolphins' last 5 games, they're 3-2, and the Giants' last 5 games, they're 0-5. And looking at the scores for the last games, the Giants haven't been able to score above 30 points. And the Dolphins as well really haven't been able to score above 30 points, but their win against Philadelphia last week was 37-31. So they were able to break the 30 mark, and their other games are about 25 and below. And so my prediction would be, like I said, they'll probably win it out 31-21. And that being said, because even though the team stats, the Giants beat the Dolphins in every team stat: points per game, points allowed per game, yards rushing, yards passing, passing yards allowed, and rushing yards allowed. The Giants definitely beat the Dolphins in every category, but it seems like they're not able to capitalize where it matters. So, like I said, as long as the Dolphins can capitalize in the red zone and get at least one touchdown, possibly 2, I think they'll be able to pull it off.
I agree. I think Miami's been really successful in the red zone up until today. And I think Miami will right the ship and get 2 to 3 touchdowns in the red zone if they play their game. But they have to play their game. If they don't, if they get down quickly, 10-0, 14-0, and have to fight back, claw their way in, they've proven they can do that. Obviously, last week against Philly, even though they lost, they did come back against Washington, and both of these teams are in the Giants division. So they've proven they can do this against teams in that division, in particularly. So I agree. If the Dolphins take care of the ball, win time of possession, don't make any mistakes, run the ball effectively, keep the ball in the air. They got a lot of talent. They got a couple new guys that they tried out today. This doesn't work out. But they can definitely win against the Giants. This team is got to be demoralized. When losing 8 games in a row, most likely when they meet, it would be 9 games in a row they've lost. So this team just finds ways to lose. And I don't really see that changing against a team that plays hungry like the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, for a team that's not in the playoffs at all, they definitely still are playing very hungry.
Definitely. And they're scrappy, they're gritty, and it's hard to beat a team that plays that way. So if you don't have anything else to add, I'm going to end the podcast for all you guys. Until next time, take care, God bless, stay safe. Goodbye.